Honestly, Dempster, I've had just about enough of you messing with me. So why make a separate episode for what starts out as a sick joke about irony and long suffering and title it A Most Incredible Day? Well, because of the heart of the adventure sometimes ends up like this. This is James at, I think, about 1 a.m. just outside of Dawson City. So this day of days started like any other day. We were sitting in our tents feeling sorry for ourselves after the previous day's adventure up to Tuktoyaktuk, where we got lambasted with high winds and rain and plus 3 degrees, I believe it was. And our intent was to go south. We would end up south of Eagle Plains, about a 500-ish kilometer day from Inuvik. But when we woke up, it was pouring rain. The road was closed at about 150 kilometers south from us, and again around 250 kilometers because there were forest fires over the road and the ferries had stopped. So what we did instead is we were going to plan to just take the day to rest and lick our wounds a little bit. But what happened next, because I'm almost pathologically incapable of accepting comfort and rest, is that I checked my app one last time around noon, and sure enough, the winds had shifted a little bit, the rains had been heavy overnight, and were continuing, so the fire was pushing a little way from the road, and they decided to open the ferry for what I assume was a couple of windows to try to get the people that had been trapped up there through. And we decided to pack up all of our stuff in a super big hurry and crammed everything what we had into a bag and then headed out as fast as we could to try to get through the 2 fires before the wind shifted again. Now, what I teach my children in Word is that when you make mistakes, don't ever make 2 in a row, because the worst thing in the world is to compound. But every now and then you have a Goldilocks day, whereas if you make enough mistakes in a row, something truly spectacular happens. Now, what happened here was that we rolled the dice on being able to get through. Now, obviously, there is a ton of rain in this video. We got absolutely hammered all day long. But our plan was to get to Eagle Plains and a little bit beyond and then camp on the side of the road. Would have been about a 500-kilometer day. But there was 3 things that kind of stop us. One is the road being closed, and then there's 2 ferries involved that had to be open at the right times, and all of them were closed as a result of the fires. So we rolled the dice that we could at least get to Fort McPherson, which was 186 kilometers south from us, which is just before the first ferry. And we figured that if all didn't turn out, that we could camp again there, despite the fact that we were absolutely drenched and all of our gear was drenched from packing it away wet. But we figured we could stage there so that on short notice we could take the ferries and push through the 2 fires. But we ended up tying everything together. Absolute pure luck. It is just one of those risks you take in the north. There is only one way in and out, and when the road is closed, the road is closed. But we were fortunate enough that for a very short window, albeit on a miserable day, we ended up getting through. When we got to Fort McPherson, we fueled up and we were invited to a fish fry down at the river, where I think they were doing whaling at that time of year, so it's like one of those rare cases of, hey buddy, want a beluga? But friendly communities up here. I think they're more than happy to share their culture in the community with you, which I'd super recommend if you get any invites there to take it in. Very friendly people. Now, I guess I make a little bit of an assumption here, but in my time in the north, going into these communities, you can have just some amazing meeting with the people there. Community eating and hunting is kind of a thing there. So, like when you get the opportunity to try some Arctic char or some beluga or caribou stew, which I affectionately call boo stew, I would recommend it. It's a fun way to get to know the stories and a little bit of the history of the area, and you often get sent off to some cool places you wouldn't have found any otherwise. Now I can say that with the full knowledge that just like everything else in life, when faced with a brick wall and an easy pathway, I always just go face first into the brick wall. We started heading south, and when we got to our 500-kilometer mark, it was still raining. So we just kept going and going and going, and we ended up doing both days' ride in one day. But what turned out with it was just this unbelievable day of just changing conditions. We have a little bit of vision here. It's hard to see in the camera. But as we were raising up to the plateau around Eagle Plains and then going through these passes, we kept going in and out of the cloud layer, and it was thick on thick. When it pours up there, it's, from my experience, a little bit different of a rain. It just sits in a super dense fog, and somehow you're wet inside. Your rain gear kind of acts more like a bucket than rain gear. So you're soaking wet, you're cold because it was only a couple of degrees. And as you can see in the video here, it did progress into a much sunnier day, but that was this is probably about 600 kilometers south from Inuvik before we really got clear of the rain. So 600 kilometers in rain and cold is a long day, but man, the visions that it created, like with the crazy lighting and the going in and out of the cloud, it was just an unbelievably magical day. Now, what's funny with these adventures is that what makes them memorable in a lot of ways isn't just the spectacular scenery like the Tombstone Mountains here that we're crossing through. It's the pressure to go through things that don't go right. We started out the day, I wouldn't necessarily say sour, we were a little bit worn out and pretty cold. But we were committed to going and trying to make the best out of it. But as the day went, despite the fact that the conditions weren't really getting much better, we found that we were just kind of really into it. We found just a solid groove, and the beautiful scenery that you wouldn't have seen normally chosen to have gone through conditions like that ended up being the highlight instead of a drawback. It was just phenomenal. It's been one of those days that since we've gotten back, it keeps coming up in the discussion, is despite it being this, I think we ended up riding roughly 14 hours that day. I think we got into Dawson around 2 or 3 in the morning, which is a phenomenally long ride for anybody. And, full credit to James. He has been riding, bikes for a long time, but he's only been a road rider for about a year and a half. And to do an 800-ish kilometer day in treacherous conditions in a couple of degrees weather, and he was just hammering it. He was in the zone through the day, and by the time it was 8 or 9 at night, it didn't really feel that way. This is honestly probably 8 or 9 at night showing in the video, but we just had smiles on. Man, we stopped in next to a river. There'll be a picture coming up here of us standing next to it, and we were eating our trail mix and drinking our drinks and jet boiling everything we could jet boil to try to warm up. But it was just serene, surreal. It was an amazing day. So I guess as a tie off to that, I'd say, like with adventure riding, don't be afraid to challenge the conditions. You always have to be safe. That's primary concern. But more often than not, the days that I didn't feel like starting are the days that I remember as just being irreplaceable. Now returning to more of a travel-oriented dialogue here. What is the Dempster Highway? Well, it was first proposed in the late 1950s. Like everything else that happens in the north and in remote areas, there was oil and somebody wanted it. So they started a road to get to the oil fields down near Eagle Plains, but they quickly found that those fields weren't going to be viable, so it was abandoned. And then in the 1970s, the government decided that we were going to assert our Arctic sovereignty by having a single road up in there under the "I licked it, it's mine" theory. And they completed the construction all the way up to Inuvik. Now, the Dempster Highway itself crosses over 2 mountain ranges, the Ogilvie and the Richardson mountain ranges. However, from having been through there a few times, I like to say that there's actually roughly 4 distinct mountain ranges there. I don't know how they separate them. I really haven't taken the time to learn, but they are, you'll see in the video here, is they have kind of a grassy meadow type, a tombstone style where they have caps on them, these weird gravel ones, and then what I would call kind of a Nunatak style, where they are large mountains with what looks like they have blades coming out of the top that are often 500 to 1,000 feet tall. Now, I've previously alleged that I am in fact a geographic nerd, so I will preface that by saying the Nunataks in most of the ones that I can see here aren't associated with a glacier, but they do look very similar with them, so I feel comfortable making the allegation that at some point they probably were associated with a glacier. Now, I will say that the road that goes through here is unique in a lot of ways because it goes through mountain ranges, through meadows, through taiga, and then through Arctic plains and Arctic delta. Now, obviously, to cross over that many different terrains, there was an enormous amount of construction challenges. This road is quite often elevated, anywhere from, and there's got to be sections that are 30, 40 feet in the air, and some that are significantly lower, but they had to deal with the permafrost up there. Most of the ground here, despite having grass on top of it, actually has an icy layer underneath as you dig down. In my previous video from 2012, I think I have a picture of inside an ice freezer where you can see where the permafrost lays out, where each year's dust is kind of compacted in, and it makes almost like a tree ring sort of a thing. But they had to elevate the road to get it above the permafrost so it wouldn't heave. Now, obviously, with such unique conditions and problems to deal with, you end up with some very interesting places to look at. This scene here and the next video, it's near Tombstone, or the Tombstone Visitor Center. It's probably about 140 kilometers from Dawson City, or 80 to 100 kilometers once you're heading north on the Dempster. Now, Tombstone is gorgeous. It's one of the highlight things and the things that they advertise. A lot of the posters for the Dempster you will see are in the Tombstone region. But It's one of the most beautiful places, and you can see in the video there that there is a double rainbow. You can almost hear the angelic music in the background. It was almost comedically beautiful going through this area. It will be a memory that I never forget. So here we are crossing the famous bridge that starts the Dempster, except we're exiting the Dempster. This is the two fuel stations as well. Now, it's hard to sum up how crazy this day was. I wouldn't say it spiraled upward. It was an incredible experience, and one that's really hard to put to video. It never quite captures it the way that you see it. But honestly, it's hard to forget. Now you'll see a picture here in a second of what we look like. It was also pretty rough. There is no denying that. We were soaked, we were dirty, and we did take the next day off in Dawson City. And quite honestly, we full on deserved it. It was a mess. We needed to do some maintenance and some cleanup. Everything was jammed full of everything. But we did stay in Dawson, and from there we head out over top of the World Highway, which I think will be maybe not this great, but pretty great as well.